This lesson will conclude the 11th chapter of Leviticus. The first part of the chapter in the last lesson went through the clean and the unclean of the four divisions of the animal kingdom. And that would be those animals living on land, those in the water, fowl, and creeping things. And God, through Moses, clearly telling us which are clean to eat and which are not. And those that are not are primarily those animals that are carnivorous, and particularly those that are scavengers. We will pick it up in verse 24, Leviticus chapter 11, and the last part of this chapter will concern touching carcasses and these unclean animals getting into residential areas and possibly contaminating. Verse 24, and for these ye shall be unclean. Whosoever toucheth the carcass of them shall be unclean until the even, until the evening time, then touching the carcass of an unclean animal. 25, and whosoever beareth aught of the carcass of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the even. So touching the carcass of an unclean animal and perhaps bearing it away would make one unclean and would require not only washing the body, but washing of the clothes. These peoples, and in fact, not until centuries later would we know about bacteria and diseases borne by animals, and particularly a decaying corpse. A person who would be unclean could not approach God, could not eat a peace offering or participate in the Passover. They would have to, if they were unclean during that celebration, then wait a month. 26. The carcasses of every beast which divideth the hoof, and is not cloven-footed, and nor cheweth the cud, are unclean unto you. Every one that toucheth them shall be unclean. So just touching one of these would render one in a state where he or she could not approach God. 27. And whatsoever goeth upon his paws among all manner of beasts that go on all four, these are unclean unto you. Whoso toucheth their carcass shall be unclean unto the even. This would be a dead cat, a dead dog, for example, or a bear, those kinds of animals. 28. And he that beareth the carcass of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the even. They are unclean unto you. This was protecting from disease, and a great many diseases and epidemics have started from close proximity with animals and being around dead animals. 29. These also shall be unclean unto you among the creeping things that creep upon the earth, the weasel, and the mouse, and the tortoise after his kind. And that word tortoise is the meaning, and if we look it up in the Strong, it is a means it has a covering, like a turtle living in a box. 30. And the ferret and the chameleon and the lizard and the snail and the mole. 31. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whosoever doth touch them when they be dead shall be unclean until the even. 32. And upon whatsoever any of them, when they are dead, doth fall, it shall be unclean, whether it be any vessel of wood or raiment or skin or sack, whatsoever vessel it be wherein any work is done, it must be put into water, and it shall be unclean unto the even, so it shall be cleansed. So a mouse falling into any kind of a vessel, any of these animals that are used, then it is contaminated and the vessel must be soaked and washed. 33. And every earthen vessel whereunto any of them falleth, whatsoever it is in it shall be unclean, and you shall break it. Now, this would be foods. This would be an earthen pot, and of course, the earthen vessels that they had would have not been glazed and fired, and they would have been porous, and anything that was in it would be contaminated, and the pot should be broken because that porous quality of clay would have soaked up any kind of contaminant. 34. Of all meat which may be eaten, that on which such water cometh shall be unclean, and all drink that may be drunk in every such vessel shall be unclean. So if a mouse has fallen into the water jar, the water is unclean. And if one of these unclean animals has been in a vessel bearing food, then the food is unclean. And everything whereupon any part of their carcass falleth shall be unclean, whether it be oven or ranges for pots, they shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean unto you. And that ranges, that would have been two parallel rocks that would have held something on which to cook, perhaps a griddle or a something like a grill. It would have rendered it unclean. 36. Nevertheless, a fountain or pit wherein there is plenty of water shall be clean, but that which toucheth their carcasses shall be unclean. And that translation there, that would be a flowing stream. And if a mouse died in the water there, it would not have been contaminated, the water, but the person removing the mouse and touching that mouse carcass would have been unclean, a mouse or such an unclean animal. 37. And if any part of their carcass fall upon any sowing seed which is to be sown, it shall be clean. Now think about a kernel of corn that is going to be planted, or a pea or a bean, and the outside of that seed is a very hard covering, and it would be protective of that embryo inside of the seed, so it will not contaminate that seed. 38. But if any water be put upon the seed, and any part of their carcass fall thereon, it shall be unclean unto you. And that would be because the water would break down that hard barrier, and it would soften and contaminate that kernel in the embryo that would sprout forth from that. 39. And if any beast of which ye may eat die, he that toucheth the carcass thereof shall be unclean unto the evening. Now this would be a clean animal, but if it just fell dead, it is an unclean and should not be eaten, and even the person who takes the carcass out will be unclean. And these laws set down by God are to protect these people and to prepare them to go into the promised land. And these laws were laid down only a year after the Exodus, so they are to keep these laws throughout what will be a long probation period of 40 years that they tramp around in the wilderness before they get to the promised land. 40. And he that eateth of the carcass of it shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the even. He also that beareth the carcass of it shall wash his clothes and be unclean. So they are unclean. And we want to think, well, why do we study all this in the Old Testament? Well, the Old Testament gives us types that will appear in the New Testament, and it will also tell us what is pleasing and displeasing to God, and it hasn't changed. 41. And every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth shall be an abomination unto you. And that creeping, that is strong word 5317, shawrites, creeping. The 42, whatsoever goeth upon the belly, and whatsoever goeth upon all four, or whatsoever hath more feet among all creeping things that creep upon the earth, ye shall not eat, for they are an abomination. And that would be the 6 legs would include insects, and 8 legs, all the arachnids, and going on the belly, of course, would be snakes and worms, and going on all fours would be like rats and those kinds of animals, and they would have been considered unclean. 43. Ye shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall ye make yourselves unclean with them, that ye should be defiled thereby. For I am the Lord your God, that sacred name. Ye shall therefore sanctify yourselves, and shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall you defile yourselves with any manner of creeping thing that creepeth on the earth. And that is defiling. And he said, I'm the Lord your God, and I am holy. And in Exodus 19:5, if you would care to look, he tells these people if they will obey and follow, that they will be a peculiar people. And that Strong's word 5459, and it means a treasure or a jewel. And then in Exodus 19:6, he tells these people that they are to be a kingdom of priests, and they are to be holy. 45, he will repeat for emphasis. For I am the Lord that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God, And ye shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. 46. This is the law of the beasts, and of the fowl, and every living creature that moveth in the waters, and of every creature that creepeth upon the earth. And those are the four divisions: land animals, water animals, fowls, and those that creep. 47, to complete chapter 11. To make a difference between the clean and the unclean, and between the beast that may be eaten and the beast that may not be eaten. God would know that they would be going in to the promised land. It would be inhabited with pagan Gentiles who would not, of course, eat in this way. And he would tell them to eradicate those peoples, but they did not always do what they were told. All right, chapter 12, a short chapter, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, now this is an indication that we will be moving into a new subject. We will no longer be discussing clean and unclean in this chapter in terms of animals. 2. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a woman have conceived seed and bear a man child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, according to the days of separation for her infirmity. She shall be unclean. And that separation of her infirmity is the menses cycle. And May fowl, she shall be unclean. And that word fowl is in a ceremonial sense, and it's pronounced May, in that she's unclean. That's Strong's word 2931 if you care to look it up, but she will be ceremonially unclean, May. 3. And in the 8th day of the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Okay, and the circumcision was begun in Genesis 17, and Jesus discusses the law of circumcision, and Jesus endorses Moses as the author of Leviticus concerning circumcision, and that is found in the book of John, chapter 7, verses 22 and 23, if you wish to look it up. There are other laws that Jesus will discuss in the New Testament, and again endorsing Moses as the author of Leviticus, the law of the leper, and that's in Leviticus chapter 8, and Jesus endorses him in Mark 7:10, Shabbat. And the showbread is discussed by Jesus in Matthew 12:4, and it's brought up in Leviticus 24. So there are these several times that Jesus endorses Moses as the author of this book. And Jesus himself was circumcised on the 8th day, and 8 in biblical numerics is new beginning. 4. And she shall then, this is the mother, continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days, and shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. And if that we count that up, that is 40 days before a woman who has just given birth can approach God. 5, but it's different for a girl. But if she bear a maid child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. So this would take it up to double the amount if the child had been a boy. And there are some differences of opinions among scholars about why, and usually recorded censuses will find that there are more females than males, and my teacher, who happens to be a male, says it's because God knows that women are smarter and stronger, and there are more of them, and 80 days there gives a longer length of time before the mother can bear another child. There are some ridiculous ideas out in the scholarly writings over the years about this. 6, and when the days of her purifying are fulfilled for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation unto the priest. So she would take this to the priest, and the blood sacrifice would be offer her a cleansing, and that issue 7, when shall offer it before the Lord, shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood. This is the law for her that hath borne a male or female. That word issue is Strong's 4726, makor, and it's a source of water, discharge, blood. It to be also for tears, makor. Now the sin offering would have been made first, and then when these offerings were made, she would have full covenant right. 8, and if she be not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtles, that's 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be clean. And of course it depended upon the wealth of the woman making the sacrifice, whether it would be a lamb or whether it would be the turtle doves or the pigeons. We have learned a great deal in the last 25 years about blood-borne disease and the separation of women during the issue of blood following a birth or during the menses cycle, when they were not to be touching that which was sacred and were considered unclean. It had to do with blood. And today, when we go into a doctor's office or a dental office and there's anything with a drop of blood on it, it is put in a biohazard container and properly disposed of, and it is the blood here that has made the woman unclean and made her possibly a person who could bring disease. This is the end of chapter 12. The next lesson will take up leprosy, and leprosy is a type for death, and it is a type for spiritual and physical death, and we will be covering that entire chapter in one lesson rather than including part of it in this one. This video has been an outreach of the Essex United Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri.